All right, hi. Here's the video for sections 4.3 and 4.4 for the Biodiversity and Evolution chapter. Taking a look at section 4.3, the overall topic is how do geological processes and climate change affect evolution. So the major thing is dealing with tectonic plates, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, climate change. You need to understand that this has actually shifted wildlife habitats. It's wiped out large numbers of species, and it's created opportunities for the evolution of new species. So what you're looking at here is 225 million years ago, the continents of Earth were actually all together in one big mass, creating this incredibly large ocean. The large mass that you see there is Pangea. The ocean was known as Panthalassa, and the reason that these began to split apart was the Atlantic Ocean began forming. The Atlantic Ocean began forming in between what you can see here as being North America and Africa. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge was created, separating these continents away, opening up the Atlantic and closing off Panthalassa, which eventually became the Pacific Ocean. They have moved very slowly apart from one another over millions of years on many gigantic tectonic plates. Basically what you see here is this splitting apart. It's going to wind up causing the extinction of species. It also could wind up creating new conditions for speciation to occur. The locations of continents have really influenced the Earth's climate and has helped to determine where plants and animals can live. And the movement of the continents has basically allowed species to move, to adapt to new environments, and to create new species through natural selection. So what you see here is kind of the next step. You got 135 million years ago. The dashed lines represent the original position of the continents. To 65 million years ago, you can see that the Atlantic Ocean has begun to open up. India is traveling very quickly north of the equator, until finally we have present day. So you can see that a lot of separation of these continents has taken place, allowing for specialization, allowing for speciation, and unfortunately allowing for extinction as well. What you're looking at here is 18,000 years ago. We're looking at continental ice coverage. Now it's difficult to, from this diagram on the left, to truly get a sense of what we're looking at. So you look at the diagram on the right. Here is North America. Okay, this is modern day. Here's Greenland, covered by ice. Okay, here's sea ice on the Arctic, continental ice on Greenland. If you were to look at the South Pole, you would have a lot of continental ice with a little bit of sea ice. Here's all this land above sea level in the green, and obviously yellow and red and brown. But you can see that 18,000 years ago, before now, all of Canada was covered by continental ice, and it actually dipped down into the United States. So it's large-scale changes in glacial ice coverage over the past 18,000 years. So what I want you to think about is I want you to think about two characteristics of an animal and two characteristics of a plant that natural selection would have favored as these ice sheets advanced. So before this was around on the left, you probably would have seen something like this on the right. So as the ice sheets advanced, what kinds of things would a plant or an animal have that would have been favored in order for them to survive the advancement of the ice sheet? So really, when you think about it, it's really kind of basic. If this ice melts, then sea level is going to rise, which in turn will increase the total area covered by oceans. So you could certainly wipe out species in that case. But this is the most recent ice age event. Long-term climate changes do have a major effect on evolution because it basically determines where different types of plants and animals are going to survive and where they're going to thrive, and it's going to change the locations of different types of ecosystems. It's going to change the locations of deserts. It's going to change the locations of grasslands and forests. It's going to change the different types of forests. Up here in the northern portions of Canada, you're going to see more coniferous forests, more evergreens, and then as you go further south, you're going to see deciduous forests. So these climate events, while I wouldn't necessarily classify them as short-term catastrophic events, they are events that do, in fact, adjust and control speciation and extinctions. All right, so now what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about section 4.4. Before I talk about 4.4, I do want you to make sure that you are reading the science focus on the top of page 90. It talks about what I like to call the Goldilocks scenario for life on Earth. If you think back to the classic story about the three bears, Goldilocks always liked things that were just right, not too hot, not too cold. And that's really what we're dealing with here on Earth. Things are just right, not just in a temperature setting. We're perfectly positioned from the sun, so it regulates the ultraviolet radiation that hits the Earth's surface, and it keeps the temperature good in order for life to form. But it also, the just right scenario is the composition of our atmosphere. The composition of our atmosphere with regard to its 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. If we were to raise the concentrations of oxygen, things would, life would not be able to thrive. It would be lethal for most forms of life if it increased to 25%. Oxygen could wind up igniting in a giant fireball because of the temperatures. If it were to drop 6%, organisms wouldn't be able to survive. So it's one of those weird things. It's the Goldilocks scenario that I like to call it. It's that just right. We're in a perfect position. Our atmosphere is just perfect when it comes to its composition for life to be able to thrive. So the concepts here in 4.4, how do speciation, extinction, and human activities affect biodiversity? The two major topics here is we're talking about environmental conditions changing. As they do change, the balance between the formation of new species and the extinction of existing species determines the Earth's biodiversity. I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like they're the birth rate and the death rate of the overall species population. If you've got the same number of new species being created as the same number that are going extinct, then you're probably not going to wind up declining in biodiversity. So it's those two factors that wind up leading towards our measurement of biodiversity. And then the second concept is you got to realize that human activities are decreasing biodiversity. We're causing the extinction of many species because we're destroying or we're degrading habitats needed for the development of those new species. So what we're looking at here is the figure 410 on the top of page 91. Speciation is basically where one species splits into two or more different species. When you're talking about speciation for sexually reproducing organisms, a new species is going to form when one population of a species has evolved to the point where its members can no longer breed and produce fertile offspring with members of another population that did not change or that evolved differently. Okay, so the speciation takes place because of a number of different factors. Okay, the reason that these changes in the genetic form of these organisms take place are because of a number of things. One is geographic isolation. What we're looking at here on the screen is geographic isolation of these two different fox species. You have the early fox population over here. It spreads northward and it spreads southward, and then it winds up separating. Okay, the Arctic fox wound up developing. This is a new species. It's adapted to the cold weather because of its heavier fur, shorter ears, short legs, short nose. The white fur matches the snow for camouflage. These different environmental conditions, the northern population and the southern population were exposed to, led to different selective pressures, and it wound up leading to evolution into two different species. The gray fox is much different. It's got lightweight fur, it's got long ears, it's got long legs and a long nose, and that's going to give off more heat, enabling it to stay cooler. So geographic isolation is where basically you've got two populations that are physically isolated from one another for a long period of time. Physical barrier like a volcanic eruption, a mountain range, a stream, a road, tectonic plate movements like we saw before, flowing water, things like that are things that could produce some geographic isolation. And then you've got reproductive isolation, where you've got mutation and change because of natural selection. Basically, it operates independently in the gene pools of two geographically isolated populations. Okay, so if these early fox species could not reproduce with one another because of some kind of geographic barrier, then the organisms that were living up here that were best suited to survive would wind up reproducing and would produce fertile offspring, and then the same deal down here. Some things before I get to genetic engineering, just some dealing with extinctions. All right, extinction is where a process where an entire species ceases to exist. Okay, where a population of species becomes extinct over a large region, but not globally. The first one was just complete biological extinction. Species is no longer around anywhere. Local extinction is where you've got a large region of extinction, but not global extinction, not biologic extinction. Okay, environmental conditions change can cause extinctions. Basically, the population has to do one of three things if environmental conditions change. It's got to adapt to new conditions, it's got to move if possible, or it becomes extinct. Okay, some things to remember, and this is something that you read in your case study today with the biodiversity of Hawaiian birds. Those Hawaiian birds, because they developed in such a unique ecosystem, they actually became endemic species. And those endemic species are species that are only found in one area. And since they're only found in one area, they're very, very vulnerable to extinction. So those endemic species are really the ones that you can keep an eye on in degraded or damaged or threatened ecosystems. Throughout much of the history of Earth, species have come and gone. All right, you've got a number of different species that have become extinct over relatively short periods of time, over long periods of time. There's some that disappear over at a really low rate. That would be called background extinction. One species in particular that went extinct over a very long period of time, or it existed for a long period of time, and then eventually evolved and then eventually became extinct, were the trilobites. But biologists do estimate that the average annual background extinction rate has been anywhere from 1 to 5 species for every 1 million species on Earth. So annually, 1 to 5 species become extinct for every million that there are on Earth. And then there's a mass extinction. So there you have a significant rise in extinction rates above that background level. And usually what happens there is you've got a major catastrophic event. Think 65 million years ago with the extinction of the dinosaurs. It's believed that the extinction of the dinosaurs was caused by an asteroid impact, which in turn caused the extinction of the dinosaurs to take place over a geologically short period of time. Okay, the asteroid hit, and I don't want you to think that the dinosaurs all just dropped dead right at that spot and right at that point. A mass extinction is something that takes place over a geologically short period of time. Here you're dealing with maybe 1 million years, okay, or a couple of million years. It's still a long period of time when it comes to human time scale, but when it comes to geologic time scale, 1 million years is a very short period of time. So usually with a mass extinction, you're dealing with anywhere between 25 and 95% of all species on Earth become extinct over that short geologic period of time. Basically what I want you to take from this, this is the diagram from page 92 from the Science Focus, Changing the Genetic Traits of Populations. This right here is an article in your book that deals with the artificial selection of populations. So it's like actually taking different traits of populations so that you can genetically engineer them into a desired result. So what we've got here is we've got a pear, and we want red pears to match the color of this red apple. So the desired trait here is a color. So you're going to wind up crossbreeding these two, and the offspring actually wind up creating this pear-colored apple, this kind of golden color pear. Here is kind of a cross between a pear and an apple that is not quite a pear, but not quite an apple. Okay, we don't necessarily want that one because the desired result we want is a pear. This right here is the original color of our pear, and here's the original color of our apple. So we take this new blended version, and then we crossbreed it with this red apple again. So then what we get is these new offspring, and take a look what we have. We have this red pear now, and that's our desired result. So we can actually do this, and then here's the desired result of our red pear, crossbreed it with another red pear, and those are the traits that wind up getting passed down. This is actually engineering genetics. So something to think about, and I'm probably going to have you write about it in class, is what could be some of the beneficial and harmful effects on the evolutionary process if genetic engineering winds up being widely applied to plants and animals. It's something I want you to think about. What could be some of the beneficial and harmful effects on the evolutionary process if genetic engineering is widely applied to plants and animals? Think about that, and go ahead and take the quiz and refer back to sections 4.3 and 4.4, and I will see you next class.